off? Is it 2 minutes?
What time is it?
Let's kick off, yeah. Good morning. Good morning, everyone, colleagues, partners, distinguished participants. Welcome to the training session at the Asia Pacific Transport Forum 2026. So the title of this event is From Strategy to Action, and today we will deliver a presentation on the Green Ports Toolkit, which is being developed as we speak. So my name is Adrian Salmons. I'm a Senior Transport Specialist here at ADB. I'm thrilled to be moderating the session today with all of you. Thank you for joining us. I'm the co-project lead for the development of the Green Ports Toolkit, and very proud of its professional development and the stages that we've been through that we kicked off last year. Firstly, if there's any questions, we'll be holding a Q&A session, and we have some exciting presentation with a case study. So I think that most of you, if you've attended the previous activities, there's an event app, or there'll be a roaming microphone. So, but firstly, I'd like to make a big recognition this morning before we get into the substance of the toolkit. I want to give a strong acknowledgement to the team behind this work, which is often not recognised properly. So the initiative it's not something that appeared overnight. It's a result of a structured multi-year effort led by ADB and supported by a highly committed and capable team and consultants. In particular, I want to recognise the ASEAN Catalytic Green Finance Facility and the Southeast Asia Regional Department that are underpinning and providing the funds for the development. So Sri Kartha, who's unfortunately travelling at the moment, Rodrigo Martinez, Gian Marcellino and Michelle Visaya, some of the lead participants in driving the project forward. And our consulting partner is SESG, based in Newcastle in New South Wales, Australia, led by Jackie Spiteri and her team. And a big special mention also to Catherine Guy, who first conceived the Green Ports Toolkit. She championed the development of it and was directly involved in the recruitment process and invited me to join as a team member in 2024. So yeah, big shout out. The clinic brought together the start of the concept with a green and resilient port clinic in Singapore in 2025. And we brought together both private port operators and public ports authorities and ports corporations from across the region in Southeast Asia. That was in October in 2025. And that was the early stage of the concept development. It wasn't just a workshop, it was an important precursor to develop the requirements and underpins the baseline of the development of the Green Ports Toolkit. So it was a regional knowledge program, and it provided some of the key ingredients for going forward. So equally, I want to recognise that there's a big effort being involved in a webinar series, which is the Knowledge Project program, which is a structured pathway that provides a multi-session webinar, including blogs and knowledge products, and it covers all types of port operations, from cruise ports to fishing ports, through to bulk operations and container terminals, and applies a green port concept that is discussed with the port operators and those involved in port governance. Today we've got a webinar from 2 to 3 p.m. on future fuels, shore power and energy transition readiness. So that's another key activity. Jackie will be leading that, and she'll provide a link to that webinar during her presentation. So sort of reflecting on why a Green Port Toolkit, why the development, why does it matter? So as we know, that the backbone of global trade, ports are involved, ports and international shipping are involved in moving 80% of the world's international goods. In fact, that number I think is much higher. It depends on the measure, whether it's the value of the goods or the actual physical tonnage of the goods. If it's physical tonnage, then it's over 90%. So ports are anchors for local economies and communities. They're the front line of the climate risk and decarbonisation pressure when it comes to the maritime and waterborne transport world. So ports no longer are just logistics assets. They're now expected to simultaneously manage environment performance, climate resilience, social licence to operate, and investment credibility to underpin that. And Jackie will go into much more detail in our panel here today. So core challenge is the reality we're hearing consistently across the region. And there's no shortage of ambition and the clarity and structure behind what ports need to achieve. So the issue is not do ports need to go green, it's the issue is how do they actually translate that addition into practical funded actions. And the Green Ports Toolkit is designed to answer that questions and provide a pathway. In the practical orientation, the Green Ports Toolkit will provide a balanced, bankable, finance-aligned intervention to provide a pathway with prioritised developments, which is the ultimate objective. So it's not a theoretical approach. The toolkit will be designed to be used across different port types and different contexts of port operations in different realms, in different geographical locations, and including inland waterways and river systems, as well as in the maritime setting. And it'll span across the application of large commercial gateway ports, small and regional island ports, fisheries, cruise terminals, other waterfront facilities, and marine tourism. And it'll answer it'll structure the answer towards three key questions, which is where are we today in our greening activities of ports, and what are the key risks and priorities, and what are the next high-impact feasibility steps towards realising the goals. And Jackie will go into much more deeper detail. So this session, over the next 90 minutes, will take you through a structured journey. Firstly, Jackie will introduce the toolkit, what it is, how it works in detail, and how it's planned to be used, including the web-based application for it. Then Guillaume will bring some practical insights from the field, drawing lessons from emerging from the knowledge program and the webinars. Quite exciting. Guillaume spent time splicing together some of the key moments from some of the webinars that have been held. Then we moved into the interactive panel. And I'd like to introduce the interactive panel, which is on the stage today. Jackie is immediately to my left. Rika Ide, ADB based in Suva. Sakai-san, Principal Transport Specialist based in Sydney for ADB. And we have the Managing Director of Sri Lanka Ports Authority, and we have Justin Cross from Haskoning Consultants. So all have a relevant focus and key understanding of the greening activities and the resilience and sustainability development and the importance for it developing ports. So the interactive panel will apply the toolkit thinking to real-world scenarios, and there'll be a question and answer session, and we'll apply it to a case study that we've developed. So with that, let me thank again the ACGF and CERD team, Shri, Rodrigo, Guian, Michelle. A big shout out to Catherine and Jackie Spiteri, the panel today, and the outstanding work that's been developed. So Jackie, over to you.
These are a bit intimidating. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us for today's session on the Green Port Toolkit. Some of you may have joined yesterday's session where we kind of gave you a bit of a taster, but today we're really going to dive into the detail in a little bit more. Just before I jump in, just a very brief introduction to myself. My background spans across environmental planning, sustainability, ESG, and investor relations within the port sector itself. So I've had the benefit of working for the world's largest coal export port, from being on the ground, stitching shade cloth to manage dust, to doing investor relations in Sydney with the large banks to do a refinance for that port. So I've worked right across the spectrum, and I'm really trying to bring that experience and that knowledge to this toolkit so that it can benefit others working in the region. So today I'm going to take you through the development of the Green Port Toolkit. It's an initiative, as Adrian mentioned, that is supported through the ADB and ASEAN Catalytic Green Financing Facility that aims to help ports navigate the increasingly complex intersection of sustainability, resilience, and investment. And what we're going to do with this over the next 20 minutes is explain why this work matters, where it came from, and what we're seeing across the region, and how the toolkit is being designed to support ports who are at different stages of maturity. So ports are much more than logistics assets. They sit at the intersection of global trade, local communities, and national development. Ports move approximately 80% of international trade volumes by sea, making them fundamental to economic growth and supply chain connectivity. But they also anchor livelihoods and communities, and increasingly they are being asked to support broader sustainability outcomes. At the same time, ports face significant pressures. Nearly 90% of major ports globally are exposed to climate-related hazards, such as flooding, storm surge, and changing water depths. We're also seeing changing workforce expectations and significant infrastructure investment requirements. So the challenge today for ports isn't simply growth, it's growth that remains resilient, inclusive, and sustainable. Ports don't operate in isolation. They sit within a landscape of international agreements, climate commitments, and sector-specific standards. On the one side, we have the broader global frameworks, climate agreements, sustainable development agendas, and disaster resilient commitments. And on the other side, we have the maritime and port-specific initiatives, certification schemes, and industry programs. All of these are valuable, but for port authorities, the challenge becomes translation. How do we turn these broad ambitions into practical decisions at the port level? Because frameworks often overlap, timelines can differ, requirements continuously evolve, and implementation ultimately happens at the local level. This image is a reminder of what happens when governance and management systems are weak. Ports can become sources of pollution, congestion, and ecosystem stress. But more importantly, sustainability outcomes don't happen accidentally. They rely on systems, clear accountability, planning, oversight, stakeholder engagement, and operational discipline. Good governance sounds less exciting than technology or infrastructure or investment, but it's frequently the foundation that determines whether sustainability initiatives are going to succeed or fail. This slide really captures one of the biggest challenges we've encountered. Global frameworks establish direction, regional and jurisdictional requirements add additional layers, and then individual ports need to interpret those requirements within their own context. Across Southeast Asia and the broader regions, maturity levels vary significantly. Some ports have advanced sustainability programs and reporting systems. Others are at the very beginning of their journey, and this creates fragmentation risks and uneven implementation. But it also reinforces why practical tools matter. The Asia-Pacific context makes this particularly important. Ports in this region serve as economic gateways, global shipping hubs, and in many communities, particularly island developing nations, they are lifelines. They support food security, fuel access, healthcare, supply chains, and disaster response. So sustainable port development isn't simply an environmental issue, it's a long-term resilience and development issue. For those less familiar with the ACGF, it is a permanent facility under the ASEAN Infrastructure Fund designed to accelerate green infrastructure investment. Importantly, ACGF isn't only about financing projects. It also supports project preparation and helps create conditions where investment-ready projects can emerge. That upstream work becomes critical because many ports have the ambition, but require the support to convert that ambition into a viable project. As Adrian mentioned, we held a Green and Resilient Ports Clinic in Singapore as part of this process. This brought together public and private sector stakeholders from more than 10 countries and involved over 90 participants. The clinic really helped identify common themes and emerging needs across the region, and importantly, it really reinforced that ports often face similar challenges despite operating in different contexts. So our assignment consists of 3 complementary components. We are developing a strategy that establishes the vision and the investment direction. We're developing a guidance note that will translate that into implementation approaches. And then the toolkit itself will operationalize both of those elements. We often describe the toolkit as the bridge between aspiration and action, because strategies alone don't always tell users where to start. So the strategy itself focuses on 3 key objectives: reducing environmental and social impacts, embedding climate resilience, supporting circular economy principles, and creating a more consistent framework for green and resilient port development. Ultimately, the goal is to strengthen the pipeline of future green port projects. Alongside this work, we've also established an ongoing knowledge series to continue engagement and share lessons emerging across the region. Guyan is going to do a detailed session on this, so I will not talk on this any further, but there is a QR code on the screen. If you scan this, you can access the previous webinars. You can also register for upcoming ones, and as Adrian mentioned, we do have one this afternoon at 2 o'clock. So what does the toolkit actually do? Well, it's being designed to be a user-friendly platform, so it will be a web-based interactive platform. It will include initially a maturity assessment component so that you can tailor your experience for your specific context. The toolkit itself focuses across 17 key aspects, looking at governance, planning, and development and operations. It will consider and demonstrate more than 85 practices within each of those aspects, and supporting that, because it's always good to learn what others have done before us, are over 170 case studies. So when you're using this toolkit, you'll be able to access that information readily. Importantly, the toolkit isn't trying to prescribe one pathway. It's intended to help users understand where are we now, what matters most based on our maturity and our focus areas, and what actions make sense in our context, and what have others done before us. To further support the users, the toolkit has been designed to align to the ASEAN taxonomy. So there are specific activities with technical screening criteria that have already been established as part of the ASEAN taxonomy, which will help position project for funding. In addition to that, we've also aligned it to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and really looking at the UN SDG targets and demonstrating where each practice can contribute towards those UN SDG targets. And again, that will help build the narrative for when you're putting together your business cases for your projects. So the project is very much still in development, but today our research has progressed and 5 themes continue to emerge. First, decarbonisation pathways are converging around common building blocks, and this includes electrification, shore power, batteries, and alternative fuels. Second, climate adaptation is increasingly becoming a board-level issue. So we're seeing a lot of countries adopting the IFRS standards for climate-related disclosures, and this really does put the onus on the board to have oversight and governance of climate-related issues. Third, nature-based solutions are moving into mainstream practices. Fourth, digitalization is delivering both operational efficiency and emissions outcomes. And finally, sustainable financing is becoming a key channel through which these projects are being enabled. What is interesting is that these themes are increasingly interconnected rather than standalone. One insight that has repeatedly emerged is the importance of governance. So the governance domain within the platform sits upstream of almost every investment decision. We're seeking stronger compliance systems, climate risk moving into enterprise risk frameworks, as I mentioned, more structured engagement processes, so really connecting with our stakeholders to understand what are their needs and expectations, greater transparency expectations, and the increased uptake of certification and benchmarking systems, some of which I showed in my earlier slides. Because increasingly, strong governance becomes a prerequisite for enabling social license to operate and attracting finance. Our work has also identified some recurring barriers. This includes governance fragmentation, data gaps, financing constraints, capacity limitations, and technical lag. But encouragingly, we're also seeing enabling conditions emerge, such as clear policy signals, dedicated financing mechanisms, regional collaboration, and leadership from anchor ports. And these are often the factors that shift ambition into implementation. So over the coming months, as this work evolves, we will continue to deliver our webinars through to December. The Toolkit launch is anticipated later this year in October. And for the pipeline reporting, we'll continue this through to the end of the year. So this will be identifying key pipeline projects, which could be prospect projects for this Green Port Toolkit. So if you're a port or terminal operator in the Asia-Pacific region, we'd really appreciate your contribution to this project. And we are running some stakeholder engagement with those ports and terminal operators. So if you are interested in contributing towards the Green Port Toolkit development, please scan the QR code and register your interest, or otherwise come and find myself or Adrian after this, and we will make sure that we get a copy of that initial survey to you. But thank you very much for your time listening to me just now. I'm looking forward to our panel discussion as we move into that. I believe we'll be doing Q&A at the end of the session, so if you did have any questions, feel free to use the app, or I think we'll have a roaming mic later on as well. So maybe back to you, Adrian.
Thanks, Jackie. And I think you got a theme for the advanced professionalism that is being wielded with the development of the toolkit and the substantive team that we have behind us, as well as the full resources and support from Asian Development Bank. The next presentation will focus on some of the transformation activities and particularly the webinars. And as Jackie introduced, there's another webinar today, and we'd encourage you to scan the QR code, and we can provide that as well. So that's from 2 to 3 today, and it's on a massively important subject, not just for green, just for the port sector, but also for the decarbonisation and resilience and sustainability across the whole range of transport activities. So the next speaker will be Gian Marcellino, who is a consultant with the Southeast Asia Department and a key member of the Green Ports Toolkit team, one of the founding members. So Gian will deliver a presentation that focuses on the aspects of what you need to consider when we're talking about green port development. So again, we'll focus on the transformation of the green port requirements of moving towards a standardised green port system, and it's not only just technical. So again, we'll also introduce the environmental performance, which is now an investment issue, as stakeholders and port users see the port node as a identifiable key node in their transactions. So importers, exporters, shipping lines are wanting the port to be recognised as a player in a transformation agenda of the greening of the transport system. And if they don't, then that's noted when port selection and competitive decisions need to come into place. And so that's another important aspect. Again, we'll also talk about how ports fare as multi-sector assets and the practical entry points for the Green Port Toolkit. So I've done too much speaking. Please, round of applause to invite Gian to the stage. Thank you.
It's quite high. Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Adrian. I'm Gian Marcelino from the Knowledge and Communications team of the ASEAN Catalytic Green Finance Facility. In this session, I will briefly share how the Green Ports knowledge work is helping move practical lessons closer to application. From the knowledge and communication side, our focus is to capture practical lessons, organize them, and help translate them into inputs for the Green Ports Toolkit. Okay, so ADB works with clients to advance green and resilient port development through financing, technical assistance, and knowledge solutions. For the Green Ports Toolkit, this means drawing from practical dialogue, global port examples, technical inputs, and decision support tools to help users move from broad sustainable goals to concrete actions. The aim is to support better planning, prioritization, and project preparation while organizing lessons to guide practical decisions. As we have mentioned earlier, the knowledge pathway began with the in-person Innovative Finance Clinic last year in Singapore. It brought together government officials, port operators, and private sector representatives to discuss green and resilient port development and financing. We then expanded the learning through monthly webinars, through blogs and social media posts to reach wider audience in the green port space and capture insights from ports, operators, technical experts, and development partners around the globe. And then these insights are now being organized through an ADB Green Ports Data Room, lodged in the Development Asia Knowledge Events page of ADB, and then carried forward into future publications and used as inputs to the Green Ports Toolkit. So the Green Ports webinar series adds a practical layer by showing how ports are addressing the green and resilient port challenges in practice, not just in policy or strategy. And across the sessions, there are 4 lessons that stood out. First, as mentioned by Adrian earlier, green port transformation depends on enabling conditions. And then second, environmental performance is now part of investment readiness. Third, port operates as multi-sector assets. And lastly, practical entry points matter because each port starts from a different context. So I'll go through each insights or lessons briefly using short excerpts from the webinars. Okay, so for our first insight, green port transformation is not just about technology or infrastructure. It also depends on the conditions that allows solutions to work in practice. In our fisheries webinar, the speakers highlighted that compliance is becoming more important for maintaining trust in seafood markets. But for small-scale fishers and smaller ports, meeting these requirements can be difficult because of capacity, enforcement, and local institutional constraints. One of our speakers, Francisco Blaha, explained why this is challenging in practice.
What is easy for the industrial fisheries to be more aware and to be able to pay for a lot is much harder for small-scale fisheries. So livelihood security increasingly is tied to compliance capacity. And the compliance capacity is complex in these situations because there's many social ties. And being in so many situations where the inspector actually is relative or the same tribe or the same group than the fishermen, so it's really hard in some cases. The structural problems that we have a fragmented governance, informality in landings and reporting, weak enforcement capacity, which sometimes is culturally complex.
Okay, so Francisco's example shows that compliance can be especially difficult when rules do not match the realities of smaller ports or local communities. For the toolkit, this points to the importance of enabling conditions. Inclusive green port transformation means helping users consider capacity, incentives, enforcement, and institutional realities alongside technical options. For our next insight, the second insight is that environmental performance is now closely linked to credibility, competitiveness, and investment readiness. For many ports, this means looking beyond technical standards and understanding how nearby communities and stakeholders experience the impacts of port operations. In one of our webinars, Sarah Barron's example from Geraldton Port shows why this matters for ports located near residential areas.
That's really critical for our region in supporting the commercial crayfishing industry. As you can also see here, we do have residential development extremely close to our port. We have very limited land buffer around our port. So yeah, significant interaction there with the community, and the port does play an integral part of the Geraldton community and how it operates. So stakeholder expectations are considered extremely critical for us in maintaining a social licence to operate.
In this example, Sarah reminds us that environmental management is also about trust. When communities are close to port operations, issues such as emissions, dust, noise, waste, and land use can affect social license to operate. For the toolkit, this reinforces the need to consider environmental risks early in the planning and to integrate safeguards and stakeholder concerns into project preparation. For our third insight, it says here that ports are multi-sector assets. They connect trade, energy, tourism, fisheries, and communities. This means green port planning needs cross-sector coordination and stakeholder engagement. One of our speakers, Scott Lagu, shared a cruise port example where planning considered guest experience, local economic benefit, and public engagement.
We're huge advocates, both in the design standpoint and the design process, where you're moving from a vision through understanding, exploring, and deciding a way to go, to have continuous and transparent civic and stakeholder involvement, but to also create those ways later in the process through implementation and operation, where you can have those ongoing conversations and receive the feedback so that you can make adjustments. And two, importantly, is building capacity in a community. It's not just about saying, hey, here's what we're going to do, but it's like, here's how you'll benefit. Here's how we'll train ground transportation operators to benefit from cruise guests being, in this location. Here's how we can help shopkeepers and retailers have better products that will hopefully elicit more spending. And we do that in a lot of different locations in clever ways. One of the most recent places, and in fact, I was just there again last week, is in the U.S. Virgin Islands. And engaging not only the local populace as to what's most important for expanding a particular location on St. Thomas, but also engaging the cruise guests and trying to find the right alignment where that facility not only is delivering a great experience for the guests, but that facility is leveraging both economic and social benefit for the local population. And when there's not cruise ships there, oh yes, by the way, it's a great public engaging community asset that folks can also sort of utilize and be involved with.
Okay. Scott's example shows why green port planning should not stop at the port boundary. The toolkit can help users filter and prioritize actions based on port type, function, context, capacity, and enabling conditions. And for our last insight, the fourth insight, is that practical entry points matter. Each port starts from a different place, and feasible action depends on its operating realities. For dry bulk ports, as our example, environmental management is shaped by the type of cargo handled, available space, existing infrastructure, investment capacity, and the need to balance productivity with environmental control. Mohammad Rafizal bin Ismail from Johor Port explained this from an operational perspective.
Of course, it is really not easy practice. So different cargo behave differently. Some are dustier, some are more sensitive. At this time, we need to balance between productivity and also the environmental control. So there were also limitations in terms of space, infrastructure. Of course, some investment need to be invest, but most important is it's not something that port can do alone. We need to have a commitment also from other port user. The port user, contractor, transporter, and also the cargo owner.
Rafizal's example shows why green port solutions cannot be treated as one size fits all. Even practical measures require coordination across the wider port ecosystem, including port users, contractors, transporters, and cargo owners. For the toolkit, this reinforces the need to help users identify actions that are feasible for their own context and starting point. So taken together, these insights or examples show that there is no single green port pathway. Global practice is most useful when it helps users understand what worked elsewhere, what needs adapting, and what can realistically be done in their own port setting. And this is where the Green Ports Toolkit becomes useful. It helps users assess their risks, their capacity, their stakeholders and investment needs, and then identify practical actions that they can prioritize. The toolkit does not present good practice as a fixed model. It helps each port determine the next step. And to close this part, ADB's Green Ports Knowledge Program helps bring global practice closer to local applications. It organizes lessons from different port contexts and translates them into guidance that can support planning, prioritization, and investment preparation. This is the value that we hope to bring with the Green Ports Toolkit, knowledge that is practical, adaptable, and useful for decision-making. So before I officially end, as Jackie and Adrian have mentioned earlier, please join us today with our Green Ports webinar this 2 p.m. in the afternoon. So it is about future fuels, shore power, and energy transition readiness. So if you want to join, please feel free to scan the QR code in front of you and register to our webinar. Jackie will also be moderating the session later. So hope to see you there. And to learn more about the Green Ports, the whole Green Ports development program, to watch our previous webinars, to read the blogs that we've written, you can access the ADB Green Ports data room through the screen, through the QR codes shown on the screen. Just simply scan it, and you'll be able to see other resources and related materials about the Green Ports initiative. So thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to share this knowledge work in contributing to the development of the Green Ports Toolkit and the broader ADB Green Ports initiative. Thank you.
Bring the microphones up a little bit higher. Thank you, Gian. That was fantastic. And please, if you can join with us today to be online for the next webinar series. It's a very exciting one, and Jackie be hosting that today with some guest speakers on the subject matter. So as Gian introduced, which is just a bit of a snapshot, the continued development of the Green Ports Knowledge Program and ultimately the Toolkit, which will be a web-based facility, is across the full spectrum of port operations and port activities. So the journey covers all different types of ports in all different aspects, and also touches on the design, so the sustainable and resilient design of ports. So from a green port development, so in a new port development, so the constructability of it, using recyclable materials, using sustainable materials that have been sourced specifically to underline that and underpin those principles. And ADB is responsible, that has a responsible financier that is assisting in the stewardship relative to the contractors that are building the facilities. That will be part of the guidance towards the selection and criteria of contractors to build the assets. So from this construction, this constructability, the recyclability, the through-life maintenance, through the core operations of the port activities. And it's not just about decarbonisation, which is obviously central to the key topic and discussion, but with electrification of the port machinery and the heavy equipment, the cargo handling equipment, and providing shore power, which is power, electric power provided to ships whilst they're alongside the berth, but also the other attributes and the activities which are harmful to the environment or the social setting and the communities which the port is connected with. And as you saw from one of Gyan's presentations, the very close proximity as ports are become in certain settings, in quite a number of settings, urban encroachment, as the port becomes a victim of its own economic success and the growth of the city from the town into a community that is residing very close. So we'll now move on to a very exciting part of today's presentation, which is the panel discussion, which is applying the principles of the Green Port Toolkit, which is in development, to a case study. And we decided that to select a neutral location with a port that we developed in our mind. So it's a fictional case, but we're applying some operational characteristics to the port of Motunui. And if you may recognise that name, it's from the Disney movie Moana. So that's our port. So to make the session practical, we wanted to move away from the theory and introduce the fictional case of the port of Motunui that represents many of the realities that small island developing states, or SIDS, as also known as, have a reality aspect to it. So it's a small multi-purpose port balancing multiple priorities simultaneously with trade, community expectations, climate vulnerability, sustainability ambitions. And whilst the port's fictional, the challenges are absolutely not. So many of the themes that the panel that we'll discuss and interact with you today will be emerging repeatedly across the work and the engagement that we have through ADB's region and sphere of activities. I think there's a slide. If you can move to the slide one. Yep. So if you move to slide 2, please. That's it. So the port profile of Motunui, it acts as the only primary gateway for trade for the country that it resides in. It handles dry bulk products such as cement, clinker, fertiliser, bulk fuel imports, and so petroleum products, containers and general cargo, as well as it provides services to inter-island vessels and passengers, fisheries activities and cruise tourism. Importantly, Motunui, it sits immediately adjacent to the capital city of the island state. It's densely populated communities, so the port isn't just about infrastructure, it's an economic engine for the country. It's a gateway port, the sole primary gateway port for the nation. It's a logistics hub, a tourism gateway, and a critical source of employment and connectivity, as well as providing foreign direct income to the country. So it creates a complex operating environment, and that'll be our case study. The panel will interrelate to this and provide application and thoughts to the greening activities. I'll pass to Jackie to further introduce the run sheet for today, but just to reintroduce the panel. So Justin Cross, from furthest to my left, is the maritime consultant for Haskoning, with more than 20 years experience, and is well known to Asian Development Bank, as well as other MDBs that they're doing work with. Sunyuki Sakai is the unit head and project administration of the Transport Sector Office of Asian Development Bank, and has vast experience in the maritime and port sector. Rika Ide, senior transport specialist with ADB, likewise has some depth of knowledge related to port development and port investments, particularly in the South Pacific now, where she's the focal and the team lead for several key projects in the South Pacific, and Rika's based in Fiji. And we're very grateful to have the Managing Director of Sri Lanka Ports Authority, Mr. Hemachandra, with us today, who I personally also involved in with Sri Lanka Ports Development. So thank you for sparing the time. So Jackie, back to you, and yeah, please participate in this interactive panel session. Thanks.
So yes, as Adrian has mentioned, this is an interactive session, but it is a slightly structured interactive session. So we will be going through the case study and considering, I guess, key elements of the toolkit and talking to our panelists about how they would respond to those. But we do also have a component where we'd be seeking input from the audience, and we will be doing this via Mentimeter. So if you have your mobile phones to hand, we would invite you to participate in that part of the session. And then once we've concluded the interactive case study with the panel, we'll invite questions from the audience as well. So if you are using the app, please feel free to pop your questions down. Otherwise, we can walk around with a mic if you pop your hand up, which is the more traditional way of answering questions. Okay, so as is often the case with ports, operational importance doesn't remove community pressures. The Port of Motunui is experiencing growing tension between port operations and surrounding communities. So we're seeing dust from open stockpiles, we're experiencing noise and traffic impacts, we're seeing stormwater and water quality concerns due to runoff, and increasing conflicts between freight activities, tourism, and waterfront uses. Because proximity creates visibility, and then visibility creates expectations. So increasingly, ports need social license alongside operational performance. When we look at operationally, Motunui relies heavily on manual and semi-mechanized systems. There are no shore-based cranes. Diesel equipment dominates operations. Bulk products are stored in open stockpiles, traffic systems are limited, and there are environmental controls that are relatively basic. So whilst these arrangements might function operationally, they do introduce vulnerabilities, and this includes things such as dust, runoff, spill risks, waste management gaps, and then that increasing reputational exposure. Climate exposure adds another layer. Motunui sits directly at the front line of climate risk, seeing cyclones, storm surge, sea level rise, heat stress, intense rainfall. And many of these hazards don't simply create environmental consequences, they can also threaten operational continuity. And so for a small island nation, port disruption rapidly becomes a national resilience issue. And unlike larger ports, there are often fewer alternatives available. Finally, we arrive at energy and decarbonisation. So today, Motunui runs entirely on diesel. There is no emissions baseline, there is no formal tracking, there's no renewable integration, and periodic fuel disruptions create both operational and financial pressures on the port. At the same time, external expectations continue increasing from our trade partners, cruise operators, and national commitments. So even modest decarbonisation pathways can become increasingly important. So now we've painted the picture of Port of Motunui, let's move into discussion mode with our panel. Because the purpose of this session isn't to tell you the answers, it's to explore how different stakeholders might approach the same challenge. So we'll start with Sri Lanka. Hemachandra, listening to the Motunui example, how much of this resonates with the challenges that you are experiencing in the Port of Sri Lanka, or ports in Sri Lanka?
Thank you, and good morning to all of you. So that the case study, so Motunui case study, so it's a different scenario in Port of Colombo. Just to introduce that, just to give the brief introduction to that, so where it's located and what it's doing in Colombo. So there are 8 ports in Sri Lanka, so all around the country. So that there are few international ports. So it's a major port, and one of the leading port is Colombo. Colombo, so when you're considering the Colombo, it's not only the other ports, so there are other ports also, international ports. So just to have an idea, so we handled that 8.3 million TEUs in last year. So that is the premier transshipment hub in the east-west shipping line, and geographically located in the middle of that east-west shipping line. So that is the brief introduction of that, the Port of Colombo. And so with that introduction, so I would like to give you that what are the challenges that we are facing right now in the Port of Colombo, especially. Basically that net zero commitment. So that all we know that, so we whether we are like or not, so we have to align with that IMO guidelines, so 2050 program, so net zero program. And also there another commitment with that the SLPA, Sri Lankan Ports Authority, to reduce the 30% of emissions by 2030. So there another commitment that we are so committed with that IMO. And the other factor is that the electrification of equipment fleet, so is another challenge that we have to invest for that, the electrifications, the conversion, so the infrastructure development. So the third one, so I'm going to one by one explaining. So third one is that what do you call that, renewable energy integration. So that, as you know that in the country like Sri Lanka, so the total energy generation, 42% from green source of energy, and the rest of that from the coal and fossil fuels. So that we are providing supply to that the ports and all the activities, 42 from the green source of energy, and there are a lot more to develop, so to meet that requirement in 30% reduction in 2030. And also that another infrastructure development that we are committed to supply shore power to the vessel coming to the Port of Colombo and turn off the engines and while docking, so that will have to provide shore power supply for the vessel coming to Colombo. And also that the green fuel supply in Colombo, so that the shipping, most of the ships now, they have converted into dual engine the systems, so that to cater that requirement, we need to supply green fuel as well in Port of Colombo. Those are the basic factors that we are considering at this time, and there are a lot more things to do that because these are embedded items that will link with the other factors. So by addressing these issues, the challenges that currently we are facing in Colombo, those are the main factors. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And I think, we're really starting to see that kind of multi-layering of international commitments, regional commitments, and then some of the challenges that a port that's quite different in nature is experienced, but probably quite similar challenges for most ports. So thank you so much for that. And 42% renewable energy already is a really impressive number. So congratulations to you on that. So next, Rika, from your experience with the ports and the regions that you're working in, what does this typically look like on the ground across small island developing states?
Thank you very much, Jackie, for your question. Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Rika Ide, Senior Transport Specialist based in Fiji. I see that several colleagues came from the Pacific countries, so probably they might be better positioned to answer to your question. But from my experience, all those 6 items are very critical. However, most of the Pacific countries already stand by for the accommodating the climate risk, and then development partner also provide technical engineering, the institutional capacity support to address any risk and uncertainty come from associated with technical capacity, climate risk, and so on. So the timely communication and then the support is quite important, and then that kind of the support stand on the coordination between the government and the development agency as well as among the development agency. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and definitely a critical issue, the climate resilience and adaptation issue in the Pacific and more broadly elsewhere. So thank you for that response, Rika. Justin, over to you. If this was your first engagement with Motunui, what would you assess first and why?
Thanks, Jackie. Very nice to be here today. It's a tricky question because there's so many different views and opinions on it. And I'm quite pleased to see the acting GM of Samoa Ports Authority here, Moe. Lovely to see you in the crowd. I'm going to talk a little bit about work we've done with Samoa Ports, because that's a journey we've supported them on for about 5-6 years. And the same question came up. How do you approach all these challenges, very similar to what is on the slide now, right at the beginning? And basically there was a 2-pronged approach. The first was every stakeholder is going to have a different opinion about what is crucial. And as we heard from Mr. Hemachandra, the port is thinking about so many different investments, and they've got limited funds, and where are they going to start with the limited resources they've got? So pulling that working group together, getting all the critical stakeholders together, and getting them together at an early stage of the project. It doesn't help to develop your pipeline of projects. It doesn't help to develop your project and get to a point and then bring them on and say, oh, by the way, we didn't engage with you, and this is what we thought, and we hope at this point you're going to buy in. So getting them on board at an early stage, understanding what is crucial to them is key. And then I think tying into exactly what your toolkit is going to be producing, being able to do that self-assessment. So again, with Samoa Ports, we went through a baseline assessment. We covered 8 different topics, and it started, I was really pleased to see governance coming through so strongly in the presentation. Governance is key. Without the right policies, without the right procedures, everything else basically falls apart. Other aspects that we consider is energy efficiency, energy generation. What are the opportunities within the port? Decarbonization. We've been fortunate, we're now working with Sri Lanka ports on a similar journey, and we've been working with Indian ports and various others, and we see the same trend over and over. When it comes to decarbonization, typically that's where about 70% of your money is going to end up being spent. So it ends up being a really big topic, but it's not the only topic under green ports. Other topics, pollution prevention, circularity, you talk about reuse of materials, it's very key, biodiversity, protection of environment, climate and disaster resilience. What are the disasters or the climate impacts that a port may face? And importantly, how does the business respond to it? How do you day one after an event, how do you get back up and running? So these are things we've been very lucky to support Samoa on. And then I think social sustainability is really important. It ties together not just how are you interacting with the neighboring community, but also looking at the port, the people within the port. What opportunities are you providing for them to develop, to grow, and make it a place where people want to work? Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Justin. And I think everything is important in that response. You know, there's so many different things to focus on, but really kind of thinking about that stakeholder engagement and prioritizing, thinking about those business risks and what's important to your organization as well, to really kind of try and hone in. So we've heard, obviously, from our example with Motunui about some of the challenges, but maybe, Sakai, maybe you can talk to us about the challenges and how they differ from larger Southeast Asian ports.
Yeah, thank you very much for a good question. Yeah, thank you. Actually, I like to highlight the difference in the Pacific country, or especially this fictional case, and what the experience in the Colombo port as well. And in Southeast Asia and South Asia, ADB is usually working with a large port, usually international hub port. And for this port, usually have a lot, the traffic volume, and also the revenue stream, and also more importantly, institutional capacity to manage this huge investment project. So we have some tools to support through the sovereign financing, but also when commercially viable, or we have the non-sovereign financing as well. And also there's a PPP opportunity, and we have the PPP office in charge of PPP transaction support facility. And so these, there are a lot of tools we can support, and the ACGF also provides some grant support also, working with all the our department for this large port. But in terms of this, especially this fictional case, and this is kind of typical in the Pacific country, I understand that we see that representative PNG, this also, PNG has a large port as well, but that may be similar to what Colombo port experience, but typically in the small island countries port are very kind of the multi-purpose and the lifeline of the country, and also in the location-wise, it's in the middle of the city usually. So when we are talking about this green port action for this small port, maybe the picture may be different from what Colombo port is experiencing and facing challenges. I think rather than we focus on kind of the advanced technology, which need a huge funding and also quite a robust institutional capacity, but probably we can start from this kind of the fixing the very basic operational needs. Like very basic one is just clean the port area to avoid the disturbance to the local community, and also the very small minor investment for the kind of dust suppression, or maybe they can construct a more kind of a covered bulk yard or something like that. And this will definitely create some harmonization with the community there, and also ensure the climate resilience as well. So yeah, and in a nutshell, what I like to emphasize is that we should start from some basics rather than become very ambitious for kind of the large investment introduction of the high-tech the equipment technology into this small island port. Yeah,
Thank you so much for that. And I think, those foundational elements are really important to get in place first, and then from there you can kind of build on those and become more ambitious with your projects as they develop. And I think really kind of recognizing the difference in scale of ports and the resources and the capacity available to those ports is also another really kind of key element that came out there. So get your phones to the ready. Oh, Adrian would like to say something, so I'll pass over to him briefly and then get your phones to ready. Sorry, Adrian.
Yeah, thank you. Hello?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you, panel. And in answering the the opening question, and the positioning of the question is relative to a small port setting, which is coming from a low base relative to how do they start, and so the context of where do you start is to, I think, start monitoring, and this is so you don't know how bad or good your credentials are relative to the categories of what a green port is, and we know that, as the panelists have indicated, there's all sorts of things from emissions, so CO2, particulate matter, dust, noise, vibration, light spill, community impacts, environment impacts, loss of natural habitat. So you're uncertain as to what the characteristics or what your where you sit within that. So I think one of the first aspects is to create a baseline. So to make a judgment call on the basis of how you need to do that, and then implement a monitoring exercise. So and as Sakai-san said, that with a small economy, then you have to adopt realistic approaches to it. So I think one of the first ones may be a appointment of a port environment manager or port environment officer, and thereafter resource that person with the necessary tools, as well as the informing as to the process and the training and the requirements, and that's institutional capacity building, which Asian Development Bank is heavily involved in. I think another aspect of a small port environment would be to engage with the port users and the port community, to understand from them what the effects of the port operations and the interaction within the port has, both on the local community, as well as the needs and requirements of the port users, being the shipping lines and importers and exporters and trucking companies and so on and so forth. And this folds into the social license to operate. So if you don't, as a port operator, if you don't know what the ambitions of your port users are and what they want to see, and are already reflecting on the fact that port users and their investments, and as part of paying the port as a transaction for using its facilities, the social license extends to what their shareholders want to see. So the owners and the shareholders, the importers and the exporters and the shipping lines want to know that they're interacting and they're transacting with a responsible party, which is the port owner, the port authority, the port operator, the terminal company. So I think that's sort of that's my thoughts, and also reflecting on how a private sector operator would perhaps proceed with such a line of questions. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you can't manage what you don't measure, so that baselining is incredibly important. And there's a really neat approach to prioritising sustainability issues through a process called materiality assessment, where you consider stakeholder needs, but you also consider the business needs and strategy, as well as risk and opportunity, and it helps funnel out some of those priority issues. So absolutely, Adrian, on all of those points. So we're just going to go through, so based on our port case study, one of the key concepts of this toolkit is recognising that not every port starts from the same place. And so we're going to do a quick Mentimeter poll using these three categories. And so we'd like your participation as the audience. We'll pull up the QR code for the Menti in the moment. But where would you place Motunui today? So based on that overview that we just provided, would you say that Motunui was basic, developing, or established? So we're going to pull up the QR code, and this is going to be really boring if no one participates because the screen isn't going to change. So I do encourage you all to grab your phone, do the QR code, and have a go, and we'll see how this room sees the maturity of the Port of Motunui. And yet, panelists, feel free to jump up and QR code it as well. So I'm not sure who's got the Mentimeter set up, but we do need to be able to see the results live. So if you can show us that, excellent. Okay, so got a bit of varying feedback here. So the shady bit that you can see in the background is, I guess, the spread of results, and then the number in the circle is the aggregated results. So we've got quite a number of people responding so far, so 17 in total out of the 39 that have registered in the QR. So if you haven't cast your vote, yes, please go ahead. But at this point in time, community engagement is kind of taking the lead in terms of maturity, so we're calling that developing level of maturity. Materials handling is sitting a little bit lower, so probably between the basic and the developing, which is probably about right if we think about those exposed stockpiles. But the fact that the port recognises it's having impacts on the community does suggest that they are thinking about those impacts, which is a positive. Climate resilience is a bit of a spread here in terms of responses, but again sitting around that kind of basic to developing position. I'll just give it a minute because things are still moving on the screen. Any surprises there? Anyone surprised by what they're seeing on the screen? Because you can see there's quite a spread in terms of perspective. No? Okay, so based on these results, we're going to get back to our panelists and we're going to chat to them about prioritization of these issues again, because it really is about managing our resources and honing in on those things that are most material to our organization. So thank you so much for participating. That wasn't boring at all. It was really quite good to see all of your thoughts on the screen, so thanks for that. But maybe, Justin, I'm going to start with you. So if resources were limited, as they are in this port, and thinking about the fact that we're kind of at that basic to developing state, what would you prioritize first out of these 3 areas?
Thanks, Jackie. So it looks like climate resilience and materials handling have come out the lowest. So I'm going to assume stakeholder engagement has started. There's a working group that has been established, and that this is the working group, and this is what you voted on, and this is how you want to handle it. So from a climate resilience perspective, I think probably the first question we would ask is, has a climate vulnerability assessment been undertaken? And really understanding what future scenarios look like and how the port might respond to that. And then, as I said, from a business recovery perspective, putting those plans in place. From a materials handling, I think the case study talks about dust being a challenge. So I think we'd probably want to understand how could dust management be better controlled? Is it through wetting of stockpiles? Is it through temporary covers? Is it better equipment handling? And a quick win might be to say, well, if it's wetting of stockpiles, are you collecting water off your buildings, putting it into tanks? Are you reusing it? And that might be one step. That's based on the screen. Another response, I'm going to come back to the opening plenary session. Mr. Yamaguchi made a really great point, which was you need a champion to get things done. Adrian's made a similar comment about, right at the beginning of the project, appointing an environmental control officer. Samoa Ports has done the same thing. They've got their sustainability lead. Having somebody within the organization who picks up all of these tasks, and whether it ends up being materials handling, climate resilience, or whatever it is, but having somebody within the port who is then going to be entrenched, understands the priorities of the business, works with the board and the management to make sure that those priorities are being delivered. Because I think as a consultant, the biggest challenge we often face is we get involved, we produce a nice report, we come up with some nice recommendations, and we leave. And then the question is, does that just become a report on the shelf, or does it turn into action? And I really like the theme of this year's summit, from priorities to action. And I really hope that by appointing a champion, by taking those steps within the organization, and it's again within the resources of the business. If you're going to prioritize how you're going to use your resources, think about the people you have, think about what you could be putting in place to really keep the momentum.
Yeah, no, that's a great response. And yeah, having that kind of internal champion helps build that internal capacity, and hopefully that grows within the organisation. So thanks for that, Justin. So Rika, in terms of your experience and based on some of these responses, what are some of the risks and pressures that you are seeing emerging locally in the regions that you're working in?
Okay. The port is, as the previous slide already explained, port is not just a transport infrastructure, it's a multi-sector infrastructure to serving the best way to the local population. So green port concept is quite important. At the same time, each country, the port authority or relevant ministry are responsible to listen to people's voice and and their expectation to the international port and the domestic port. So the agency are expected to find out the balance that what is the best way to move forward with the development of the ports of the relevant international port or the domestic port. And so the environment management and the climate risk or decarbonization and so on, those are quite important, and most of the Pacific agencies are already addressing that. However, the things might be, we need to be mindful, particularly the development agency, that concept, theoretical idea, those are quite important, but those have to be well translated or interpreted by taking into account the local context. Otherwise, we will have just a paper which will go to the shelf in the agency. We need to avoid that. And then I would like to emphasize that situation is the biggest risk for the introducing some concept. But I believe that most of the agencies are quite aware of that issue. So the consultant, the development agency, are responsible to listen to the agency's need and the capacity, and then the human resource issue, that how the green port concept, which is relatively new, can be adapted to the further port development in the Pacific country or other small island countries.
Thank you so much, Rika. And it really is, how do we operationalize this? How do we integrate it into the business's DNA to make sure that it kind of continues after the report is finished, and so that report doesn't end up sitting on a shelf, getting dusty or forgotten about, or doing the same thing again in a few years' time and having forgotten about the one that you had sat there. So I think it really is about kind of that integration and embedding into the organization. Okay, I might move on to the next question, and so we can kind of keep moving through the sessions. I'm not sure we're going to finish on time otherwise, so we'll get to our other panelists on this next piece. But now we're really moving forward from diagnosis to delivery. So now we understand where Motonui sits. The next question becomes, what actions are realistic, and we're not assuming unlimited budgets or major infrastructure programs. We're looking for practical fit for context interventions. And Hemachandra, you've already mentioned some of the initiatives that are happening at your port. So maybe you could provide a little bit more of a deeper dive detail on some of those initiatives that you're looking at as you've just worked on the Green Port exercise.
Yeah, thank you. So I would like to appreciate that the word came from Mr. Justin, so that all the reports, consultants report, and so it's a good question, that a good thing that you raise. So all that we can prepare. So finally, if the reports and the consultant report are in the Almira, so it's a big question so it's a big problem. So the implementation is under the division of management, so that all the managers and the port operators here in this room, so we have responsibility to implement that green initiatives in our organization. So coming back to that, your question, that the diagnosis and delivery. So in Port of Colombo, so the decarbonization and electrification process. So there are 5 terminals container terminals in Port of Colombo. So when you consider all the terminals, some of them are already converted into electrified terminals, all are all electric terminals, and some of them are converted into electric, and the other terminals are hybrid and diesel engine operating terminals. Though that the electrification is there at right now, and there are a lot more things to do for the electrification work. So the other terminals now in the process of doing that electrification work. And the other part is that the digitalization and AI-driven optimization. Digitalization part is there at the Port of Colombo. So we are now fully aligned with that port committee system. It's yet to be implemented, and also that national maritime single window. So that is in the lineup, in the next lineup in the port development process. So those are the factors that currently we are considering and delivery phase. And also that the things that the integration of green energy to the systems. That is also very recently that there are a lot of initiatives from Sri Lanka. So the Hambantota, we initiated 150 megawatt solar power project. So grid integration, that is a pending grid integration process. Those are the current activities that in the process or in a near future, we are going to complete that. Those are the things that main delivery phase. There are a lot of things that we are doing, and also that the green initiatives with the collaboration of World Bank and the ADB support. So we are going to have some green energy development at Trincomalee. So the idea is, main idea is to develop green and energy hub in Trincomalee. As you know that in Second World War era, there are massive construction on 99 tankers having 1 million tons capacity in liquid fuels. We can store there in Trincomalee. So that we have planned to utilize those tankers for the future requirements. So those are the things that in currently process under the green initiatives. And so once we set up that the green and energy hub in Trincomalee, so is a plan to have green corridor from Trincomalee to Colombo for delivering energy requirement in Port of Colombo. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and it's great to hear that some of that implementation has already commenced and there's further implementation plans ahead. Okay, so now, and ultimately we arrive at perhaps the most important question is how do we think about funding our projects and initiatives that we want to support. So Rika, I might start with yourself, and maybe you can give us a bit of an overview of some of the green funding frameworks that are currently in place and that might be applicable for a port thinking about funding.
Well, I understand that ADB have a maritime specific fund, if I understand correctly, that is a possible resources. At the same time, each development partner have a project financing or the thematic funding. So probably the development partner and then the counterparty agency or relevant government agency, particularly the Ministry of Finance, the Public Works, and so on, may explore the possible solution. And then these days, the climate change and decarbonization things are the quite hot topic in the development world. And then we have there are a variety of the funding sources offered by the bilateral agency or the multilateral agency. So those kind of options could be considered widely. So, and then the agency, the counterparty government agency may also consider to take into account those options, but we need to be keep in mind, we need to keep in mind ourselves with that, or where the technical proposal have to be submitted, which is quite a first challenge for us to tackle on that. So and for that, policy instrument, policy arrangement, and established institutional arrangement, how the Green Port initiative could be integrated into your agency. That is a very key issue, and then development partner or fund provider also look at that. So the one key point is that if any port agency or the relevant government agency are looking at the Green Port to be integrated into their international port or domestic port, agency or the government may consider that how they can provide, how they can establish the dedicated team to promote such a new initiative. That is a quite important point to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rika, and definitely an important point there. And I think, beyond the outline that Rika's just provided, there's also the ASEAN taxonomy, which provides a framework for technical screening criteria for green projects, which is a really good place to kind of have a look. And within that, they introduced the transportation sector in the most recent version 4. So that's also a really good resource that can support you in thinking about the criteria that might be required. Justin, what level of detail is required before projects become investment ready in your experience?
It's another tricky question, Jackie, because I think it comes down to the confidence in making that investment decision. So we often get this question of, well, if we do something at a concept level, is that enough for us to commit funds and move ahead? It's up to your level of risk taking, and I think it's always good to get to a point where the board and the management of the port, everybody feels comfortable with what's being proposed. And generally that means if we're doing a breakwater rehabilitation project, maybe there's geotechnical investigations that need to be done. Maybe there's quarry investigations that need to be done. Maybe there's assessments of society, how are we going to get the rock to the port safely? Because the last thing you want is you want to kick off your project and then realize that you've got a lot of problems along the way. So it comes down to that risk appetite, I'd say. Can I make one quick pitch just about Piank?
Oh, yes.
Just because I think it might be useful and relevant for this group. So when I'm not doing my consultancy work on the side, I'm the chairman of the Piank working group that is developing guidelines for ports in small island countries. It's a document that we've been working on for about 3 or 4 years. I'm pleased to say that in the next 2 months it's due to be published. So there will be a webinar next week where we'll be presenting the new Piank guideline. And I think it's, if you'd like to know more about it, please reach out. I'll send you the link. And as I say, hopefully in the next 2 months, that guideline will be published.
Yeah, absolutely. Piank is certainly an excellent resource for the waterborne transport infrastructure sector. So it sounds like there's a perfect working resource coming out of that. We might just wrap up the session with just one last question for Sri Lanka. What barriers have you experienced accessing funding to date, and how have you overcome those? Because it might be some good experience sharing for the room.
So that main thing is that sovereign credit and economic hurdle in the country. As you know that the last couple of years we have been suffering from that, the critical economic crisis in Sri Lanka, that now it's gradually becoming normal. So that that is the barrier to implementation, and also that the fragmented bureaucracy among that the institutions in Sri Lanka. That is basically, there are a lot of agencies interconnected, and their consent and their concurrence is required for the implementation process. Those are the major factors that we have to consider when that implementation process and delivery process.
Thank you so much for sharing that experience, and I'm sure maybe that resonates with some in the room today. We are almost at time. Adrian, do you want to take over, or maybe I'll make an opportunity for a couple of questions? Yeah. We maybe just do 1 or 2 questions, if there's any questions from the audience for our panel, seeing as we've got a great panel of esteemed speakers there with lots of knowledge and experience. Yep. Do you want a microphone? We can run a microphone over. There we go. Adrian.
Hi, everyone. My name's Ryan from APCO, an advisory firm. Since we were talking about funding, I was just wanted to think about from an investor standpoint of the financial story. What are the types of revenue generating or cost recuperation kind of things that come from these green initiatives, that just you can talk to investors about these are the good things that come from a financial perspective with these interventions? Thank you. I guess it'd be for Justin, maybe? I don't know.
Oh, there you go, Justin.
I was hoping you're going to say Mr. Hemachandra, but okay, I'm happy to take it. I would say one of the things that we're seeing is that within the cruise industry has got quite a sort of a tainted reputation around being a polluting industry. And we're seeing more and more pressure being put on the cruise industry for terminals to be providing shore power so that those vessels can, as much as is possible, show that they are embarking on green destinations, destinations that support decarbonisation and a green transition. Similarly, waste management procedures, similarly working with local communities in terms of tourism opportunities. So being a green port creates good business opportunities. That's the first example I can think of.
I would like to add a little more things about that, the Justin's answer. So we are always focused on that, the return on investment for all the investment, what they're supposed to do. But when you're looking at that, the environmental assessment and environmental impact, so some of the investment that should go to that, the prevention of, that protection of environmental damages and impact. So that is also the turning point and the major factor that we'll have to consider. So in most cases, I fully agree with that. So the ROI is a basic factor that we are considering. But here in Green Port initiatives, so we'll have to focus, we'll have to decide on different way that, so whether that normal, what we are thinking in normal pattern, so that is my concern about that, your answer there. Thank you.
I think that's a really good point, actually. Protecting the environments in which we're operating is critical. Having those protections to prevent that kind of pollution protects our fishing kind of areas and our livelihoods. And also, I think, thinking about some of the social impacts, and it's not always about return on investment, but it might be a safety impact. So like an LED lighting upgrade, for example, you'll replace all of your old halogens, you'll end up with reduced energy consumption, which obviously has a reduced cost attached to that, but it also reduces the amount of times that someone has to climb a ladder and change that halogen light bulb, because LEDs last a lot longer, so you're also having a safety aspect improvement there as well. So it's about looking at all facets, as well as return on investment, which is obviously very important for everyone in this room, but thinking about those environmental benefits and those social benefits as well. Any more questions from the room? No? Silence? We've answered everything. I'll hand back to Adrian.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, panelists, for your experience and knowledge and wisdom. And thank you to Jackie for as our expert, and also her work and efforts to bring us to this stage with the development of the Green Ports Toolkit. Please diarise October this year for the launch of the Green Ports Toolkit. Be a big event, and we'll have a bit of an advertisement leading up to that stage. So I'm pleased that we filled the auditorium today with parties interested in green ports and environmental stewardship relative to the to waterborne transport and the port sector. With that, please join me with thanking a round of applause to the panelists, as well as the team for the Green Port Toolkit. And again, at 2 p.m. today, we have the webinar, which would encourage you to join, and that QR code that you scanned before will give you the access to the previous ones and the future ones that are going to be held. Yeah. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day and the lunch that the forum has provided. Thank you. Thank you very much. want to join the photo?